I am 75 years old. Last spring, my own children sat me down at the kitchen table my husband built with his own hands, and before the candle burned halfway down, 3 of them told me I was damned. Not shouting, not angry, just certain, the way you tell someone the bridge ahead is out. For 70 years I wore the kapp. I obeyed the Ordnung. I never once raised my voice against the way we lived. And then, 1 year after I buried my Eli, I did the one thing my people cannot forgive. I walked out the front door of everything I had ever known, and I followed Jesus. They say I am lost. They say I shamed the name we carried. They say no plain grave will hold me now, and I have never, in all my 75 years, been more free. If anyone has ever told you that following your own conscience would cost you every person you love, stay with me tonight. Sit at this table, because there is something I have to tell you about that night, about my 4 children, and about the quiet man I was married to for 51 years. By the time 3 of them stood to leave, only one was still calling me Mamm. I need to tell you which one, and I need to tell you what I found in my husband's workshop the week after. If this already stirs something in you, take a moment now to subscribe and stay to the very end. This is not the story you think it is. You have to understand the silence first. Before you can understand why I left, you have to understand what I left, because the world does not know us. It knows the bonnets and the buggies and the photographs we never agreed to. It does not know the silence. In our home, there was no hum in the walls, no light that came on without a match. When the sun went down, the day was simply over, and you sat with whatever was inside you, because there was nothing else to drown it out. I have lived my whole life in that quiet. I was born into it the same way I was born into my own name, and for most of my years, I believed the quiet was the same thing as peace. Eli built our house the year we married. He was a furniture man, a joiner with hands that could feel a flaw in wood I could not even see. He built the table I would later be condemned to cross. He built the bed our children were born in. He built the bench under the window where I sat every evening of my married life. And he never once told me he loved me, because our people do not say such things out loud. He showed me. For 51 years he showed me, and I thought I understood the whole of him. I buried him on a gray morning with 200 people standing in our field, and not one camera among them. And then I went home to a house that for the first time in half a century had no other breathing in it. That is when the silence stopped being peace. That is when I learned the difference, because grief does not respect the Ordnung. Grief does not keep its voice down. In that empty house, the quiet I had trusted my whole life turned on me, and in the long evenings it began to ask me questions I had spent 70 years not asking. Was I ready? If I lay down in that bed and did not wake, was I ready? I had obeyed. I had kept the rules. I had worn the right clothes and bowed my head at the right times, and never, not once, stepped outside the line. And lying there in the dark, I could not have told you if any of it had ever reached God at all. I want to tell you about the last weeks of Eli's life, because I did not understand them then, and I understand them now. And the distance between those two is the whole reason I am talking to you tonight. He was sick a long time. Near the end, the family allowed an English nurse to come. a kind woman who drove out from town and sat with him when the pain was bad. I was in the next room more often than not, and our walls are thin. And so I heard things I was not meant to hear. Most of it was the ordinary talk of the dying. But one afternoon, near the very end, I heard my husband. My obedient, silent husband, the man who never broke a rule in his life. Ask that English nurse a question I have never been able to forget. He asked her so quietly I almost missed it, whether she thought God could receive a man just as he is. Just as he is. I stood in that doorway with a basin of water going cold in my hands, and I did not understand the question. I thought it was the fever. I thought it was a dying man's fear, and I went in and cooled his forehead and said nothing. I did not know yet that he was not afraid. I did not know that he was telling me something. It would be a year before I understood that my husband was not asking that question for himself. He already knew the answer. He was leaving it for me. But I am getting ahead of the night at the table, and I promised you that night. I have to tell you what it is to be hungry for something you are not allowed to name, because that is what those first months of widowhood were, a hunger. In our world, you are taught that salvation is not a thing you can be sure of. To say, I know I am saved, is pride, and pride is the worst of sins. You hope, you obey, and you hope, and you submit, and you die hoping. And for 70 years, that had been enough for me, or I had told myself it was enough, because what else was there? But alone in that house, the hope had gone thin. I did not want to obey my way to a God I could only hope was there. I wanted to know him. I wanted to be known by him. And there was no word for that hunger in the language I was raised in, no place to put it. And wanting it at all felt like a betrayal of everyone I loved. I had a granddaughter, my John's girl, who had been given a small book by a teacher in town, an English New Testament, the kind the world hands out for free. She was not supposed to have it. I was not supposed to read it. I held it one afternoon when no one was home, and I opened it to the words of Jesus, and I read a sentence I had somehow never heard in all my years of church. He said, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Rest, not more rules, rest. I sat down on the floor of my own kitchen with that little book, and I wept like a child, because I was 74 years old and laboring and heavy laden, and no one had ever told me I was allowed to come. There was something else in those days, a small thing. I want you to remember it. All my life I had loved to hum while I worked, and all my life Eli had gently corrected me when the tune was not from the Ausbund, our book of hymns, the slow, ancient songs we are permitted to sing. There was one tune I caught from an English neighbor as a girl, a tune I never knew the words to, and Eli always used to touch my arm when I hummed it, a quiet reminder. But in his last years, he stopped. He never corrected that one tune again. He would just go still and let me hum it, and once I caught him with his eyes closed, and I thought he had simply grown tired. I thought it was age. If you have ever loved someone for 50 years and missed the most important thing about them, you already know the weight of what I am telling you. Hold that small thing. It comes back. If something in this is reaching you, do me one kindness. Leave a single word in the comments, just one. The word for what you are feeling right now. I read them. I am not as alone as my people think. Now, before the table, I have to tell you about Sarah Byler, because the night at the table makes no sense without her. Sarah was a woman from our district, 10 years younger than me. When I was in my 50s, Sarah left. She had found something, we were never told what, only that she had gone English, gone to one of their churches, and would not repent. And so the ban came down, the Meidung, the shunning. I want you to understand what that word means, because the world says it softly, like a disagreement. It is not a disagreement. When the ban falls on you, your own mother cannot take food from your hand. Your children may not eat at your table. You become a chair that is no longer set, a name that is no longer spoken. You are not dead. It would be cleaner if you were dead. You are a ghost they have agreed to stop seeing. I watched it happen to Sarah Beeler. I watched her stand at the edge of a gathering with her arms full of bread no one would take. And I watched her own sister look straight through her, as though the morning light were passing through empty air. And God forgive me, at the time I believed it was right. I believed she had earned it. I tell you this, so you understand that when my children came to my house, I knew exactly what was on the table. I was not a fool. I had watched the price be paid by another woman 30 years before, and I knew that the same arms full of bread, looked straight through ghosting, was waiting for me on the other side of one word. I knew it the way you know the cliff is there in the dark. In Eli's workshop, on a high shelf above his bench, there was a book, a thick, worn book, the cover soft as cloth from handling. For 50 years I had assumed it was his ledger, the accounts, the orders, the figures of a furniture man's trade. I never once took it down. A wife does not go through her husband's business. It sat up there gathering sawdust through our whole marriage, and I walked past it 10,000 times and never gave it a thought. Remember that it is there. I did not open it for a year. When I finally did, it broke my life open like an egg. But the table first. I promised you the table. It was a Tuesday in spring. They came after supper, Amos, my eldest, and Mary, and John, and last of all Rachel, my youngest, who said nothing at all. They sat at the table Eli built, in the chairs Eli built, and Amos had brought the bishop's words with him, though the bishop did not come himself. That is how it is done. You are loved enough to be warned, and warned in a way that leaves no room. Amos is 53 years old, and he has his father's hands, and none of his father's quiet. He laid those hands flat on the wood, and he told me, gently at first, that they had heard, that a neighbor had seen me going into the English church in town, that this could still be undone if I would only repent, only stop, only come back inside the line. He said the word damned without raising his voice. He said it the way Eli used to say a board was warped, a simple fact about the nature of a thing. You are reading the English Bible, ma'am. You are saying you are saved. You know where that road ends. We are trying to save you from it. Mary cried. My Mary has always cried, and her crying has always meant she had already chosen, and she had. John did not cry. John was afraid for his children, afraid of what it would cost his own household to have a shunned mother, and his fear came out as cold reasoning about what was practical and what was not. And Rachel sat at the far end and looked at her own hands and did not say one word the entire night. And I want to tell you what was in the room, because this is the thing I cannot make people understand. These were not cruel people. This was not hatred at my table. This was love, the only kind of love they had ever been given, a love that could only be expressed as a rule. They were not trying to wound me. They were trying to pull me back from a fire they truly believed was real. In the pulpit of their certainty, they wept for me. And across that same kitchen, in the name of saving my soul, they took it apart. So I will ask you to do something, and then I will not ask you for anything else tonight. If there is a person in your life who stops speaking to you over what you believe, a parent, a child, someone whose name still catches in your throat, write that name in the comments, just the first name. You will not be the only one. There are more of us at this table than you think. Amos asked me finally, with the candle low, to choose, to say the word that would end it, or to keep the silence that would damn me in their eyes forever. And I thought of Eli. I thought of the table under my hands, every joint of it cut by a man who never told me he loved me and showed me every single day. And I thought of his last words, which I have not told you yet. In his final hour, drifting, my husband had opened his eyes and looked at me and said 3 words. He said he kept me. I thought that whole year that he meant the community had kept him, that the rules had held him faithful to the end, the way they were supposed to. He kept me, kept on the narrow path, kept inside the line, kept by us. I held those words like a comfort, and I had them completely wrong. But at the table, with my son asking me to choose, I heard them differently for the first time. He kept me. And I opened my mouth, and instead of the word that would have saved my place among them, I said they offered me rules. Christ offered me a person, and I cannot unmeet him. Amos stood. Mary stood, weeping. John stood. 3 chairs scraped back across the floor of the house their father built, and 3 of my children walked out into the dark, and not one of them called me Mamm as they went. The ban would be formal within the month. I had become Sarah Baylor. I had become the ghost at the edge of the light. I want to tell you about the first time I walked into an English church, because it is the hinge of everything. It was small, plain enough that even I did not feel the shame of decoration. And an old preacher stood up and read from the book of Ephesians. By grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast, not of works. I had spent 70 years on works. I'd folded my hands and bowed my head and kept every rule that was ever handed to me. And this stranger was telling a room full of people that the rules had never been the door at all, that the door was a gift, that you came to it just as you were with nothing in your hands, and you were received just as you are. Somewhere in my chest, a tune I had hummed my whole life, without knowing the words went quiet and still, the way Eli used to go quiet and still when I hummed it. I did not understand yet why those words struck me like a hand on the arm. They offered me rules, I thought. This man is offering me himself. And I walked out of that little church carrying something I had wanted for 70 years and had never had a name for. And I drove home past the dark windows of the only world I had ever known, and I wept the whole way, not from grief, from homecoming, It was the week after that, alone in the house, that I finally went into Eli's workshop. I had been avoiding it. His tools were still on their pegs in the shapes of his hands. The last thing he ever made, a small cradle for a grandchild not yet born, sat half-finished under a cloth. And on the high shelf above his bench was the worn book I had walked past for 50 years and always believed was his ledger. I do not know why I took it down that day. I think I only wanted to hold something he had held. But the cover was soft as cloth from a lifetime of handling, and when I opened it, it was not a ledger at all. It was an English New Testament, older than our marriage, worn to softness by hands I had held in mine for 51 years, and every page was marked, underlined in pencil, gone over and over, the soft gray lines of a man returning to the same words across decades. My husband, who I believed had never broken a rule in his life, had been reading the forbidden book in secret since before I knew him, obeying every law our people gave him in the daylight, and on his knees in this sawdust in the dark, he had found the one the laws were only ever pointing toward. I turned the pages with shaking hands, and I found where the pencil pressed hardest, where he had gone back the most. It was a verse in the first letter of Peter, who are kept by the power of God through faith unto salvation, kept. He had underlined that one word 3 times, and beside it, in his small, careful hand, he had written a date from 40 years before he died. 40 years. He kept me. My husband's last words were not about the community. They were not about the rules. He was telling me where he had been the whole time. He was quoting the verse he had pressed his pencil into for 40 years. He kept me. God kept me. And in the next room I had heard him ask a nurse whether God could receive a man just as he is. And he was not asking for himself. He already knew. He had known for 40 years. He was rehearsing the words he hoped I would one day hear. And the tune he stopped correcting, the one he closed his eyes to let me hum. I know now what it was. It was a hymn from the English world. Just as I am, without one plea. He had recognized it. He had let me sing my way toward the door he had walked through alone, decades before, and could never say out loud. I had spent that entire year believing I was the first in my family to find him. I was not the first. I was the second. My Eli had simply gotten there 40 years ahead of me in the dark, in the sawdust, and had never once been able to tell me, and had spent his last breath leaving me a trail of crumbs so that I would find the door he found and not have to find it alone. He did not leave me in that silence. He went on ahead and held it open. I am 75 years old, and the people I love most in this world have agreed to stop seeing me. I will not pretend that does not cost. There are mornings the empty chairs are very loud, but I am not a ghost, and I am not damned, and I am not, as it turns out, alone. Not even in my own family, not even in my own bed for 51 years. The man beside me had been free the entire time. He just could not say so, and he spent the last thing he had making sure I would find out. In the spring, something appeared on my porch, a jar of preserves set on the rail in the early dark. No note, no name, but I know my Rachel's hand. I know how my youngest seals a jar, the cloth she ties over the lid. She did not knock. Under the ban, she cannot. She cannot take bread from my hand or speak my name in the lane. But she can set a jar on a rail before the sun is up and walk away and let me find it. And I understood, holding it, that love does not always get to use its voice. Sometimes it has to go quiet and still and leave a thing on a shelf for you to find later. Eli taught me that. Rachel was only saying it back. There is a verse I keep now, the one I would have given my children at the table if they had stayed to hear it. Jesus said, "If the Son therefore shall make you free, ye shall be free indeed, not free of cost. I have paid, I am paying, but free in the deepest place, the place no man can reach, and no rule can hold, and no silence can take back. I spent 70 years believing that freedom was dangerous and obedience was safe. I had it exactly backward. The rules could never have saved me. They only ever taught me to be afraid. And on the other side of the one thing I was most afraid of, losing them, becoming the ghost walking out the door, was not the fire they warned me of. It was a person who had been waiting at that door my whole life, and a husband already inside, who had left the lamp burning for me. If you are standing at a door like that tonight, afraid of what it will cost to walk through, I cannot tell you it will not cost. It cost me everything I thought I could not live without. But I am 75 years old, and I have lived now on both sides of that door, and I can tell you the only true thing I know. The fear was the prison. The freedom was him all along. And in the evenings now, when the house is quiet and the chairs are empty and the day is simply over, I sit on the bench Eli built me under the window, and I do not fill the silence with anything anymore. I just hum the old tune, the forbidden one, the one he closed his eyes to hear. Just as I am ready now